thing about a coach is that they're not there to tell you what to do or to railroad your decisions. They're there to support you.
Welcome to CTIO 101 Episode 7, Coaching the CTIO, sponsored by Fairmont Recruitment, hiring technology professionals across the UK and Europe.
What are technical folks like CIOs, what they like to work with? Is there a type, or do you see like a range, or do you see, well, actually there's 4 types, or are that everyone's different? What's your experience so far been just dealing with the likes of, dare I say it myself, that kind of CIO, CTO?
Yeah, it would be unfair to say there's a type because most of my life saying that you can't put people into boxes. But see is that people have probably come from a certain place where they've come from learning tech skills, using tech skills, and then are in a position of management leadership. And so they might be coming from a perspective plus potentially perhaps more of, equal size. So they're more focused on detail. They're more focused on getting things done rather than relationships with people, let's say, potentially. But that's not by putting everybody in a box. That would be completely unfair.
Julie, you're so diplomatic in your wording there, because what I heard was technical people are great at getting stuff done, but they might not bring everyone along with them. And actually, potentially, but bringing everyone along with them would make life a lot easier. But those are sort of softer, they call them soft skills, don't they? Which is beyond just being able to understand the technology side. If we talk about a coach, I've had a few coaches, they've all resigned under protest. I just said, I'm sorry, John, you're uncoachable.
You're not.
My first ever coach, I was terrified because of, I suppose, for me, it was the amount of trust I had to place
Absolutely
in this person. And also, I was worried that if I got the wrong kind of coach, somehow they'd hypnotize me into doing the wrong thing. Before you've had a coach, you're so used to just, well, you think you're relying on yourself. Does that make sense? Do you see folks going through a process?
Happens all the time, and John, to be quite honest, because I think, growing up, the only thing you ever hear about is perhaps a football coach or something like that, and shouting at people on the pitch. The thing about a coach is that they're not there to tell you what to do or to railroad your decisions. They're there to support you, to challenge you to making a decision or taking a road, helping you to fathom out what that road should be, really. They're not there to tell you what to do.
Your football coach and everything, I think it's going to really resonate with folks. So what we were saying was taking that first step of getting a coach can be quite daunting. Are there any kind of do's or don'ts when you're trying to get started with a coach?
Yeah, definitely. There's a whole bunch of do's and don'ts. So, first of all, don't just pick one on the price. Don't pick one because they're the cheapest coach. Not that you would, but the biggest thing for me is if you're going to spill your guts and you're going to say how you really feel and you're going to get vulnerable, the very first thing you've got to do is you've got to like that person. Right? You go out with them, you don't necessarily want to go down the pub with them, but you need to be able to have a relationship with this person where you're able to say the truth. Because if you can't say the truth, then the coach can't coach you and you can't coach yourself because you're denying yourself. And to be quite honest, John, you're a coach. We're really good in what we should be doing and procrastinate over things. And the whole point about this is to get real and to get over that stuff, to make good decisions, to take action. And that's what the coach is there for. So the biggest thing you've got to be able to do is to feel safe enough and that you like them enough to be able to say the truth so that then you can deal with the truth, good or bad, how ugly that might be, and then move on. I think that's really important.
Something's just struck a chord with me, which is very obvious, but you're talking about someone that you trust, but also someone who will be straight with you. Those two factors are important. And that made me think a bit about your background. Do you want to just give a little bit about some of the things you've done professionally?
So in the police, I was an inspector in Hertfordshire Police for 16 years. And I absolutely loved it. And what it did was teach me massive amounts about people and why they either do or don't do what you want them to do. And at the risk of sounding a bit geeky about policing, UK, we're all about policing by consent. We're not about whacking the gun out, telling people what to do. We're about, even if you're going to arrest somebody, you want to be able to do it in a way that they comply as much as they possibly can. And therefore, this is all about how you create a relationship, how you can help people to want to do what you want them to do, and which they have to trust you, even if they're going to be arrested. I remember a time when there was one guy who was a really big burglar and, need to deal with this stuff. And he's like, no. Well, how about you come in on Wednesday, work you up, you come in, he says, that's brilliant, because then I know that you're going to deal with me like honestly and openly and carefully. And I can trust you, something horrible I've got to deal with, that I can have an adult to adult conversation. I'm not going to be able to feel stupid or any of those things. And I can deal with it as bad as that situation is for that person. And I
Yes.
think that's a little bit like coaching, really, is that
Yes.
you're going to have to tell me something that you may not like about yourself or you may not like about what's going on. And you've got to feel good about it, because if you don't, you're never going to say it. And then you're never going to deal with it.
One of the things I think with the CIOs, and any profession where you've got your blinkers on at a certain point, this is like pre-coach, and you're thinking there aren't many people who really understand the pressure I'm going through, or the decisions I'm having to make, or the accountability I've got with all these data centers and all the rest of it. I think it's really important, Julie, in terms of your credibility, being an inspector in the police carries with it a huge amount of accountability and pressure.
Yeah.
You're not coming at this from a perspective of not understanding what operational pressure is. You're actually coming from it from someone who's successfully managed it and dealt with it.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I'll feel a little bit in my previous careers. I was an engineer originally, but we won't dive into that. But yeah, think about policing, that you never know what's coming. And that's a bit like your data center crashing, I suppose, every day, in that you turn up and you have to deal with what you have to deal with right there and then. Yes, you can plan for some things, but at the end of the day, you've got a team of people who are out there on the ball dealing with stuff. And you've got to be able to manage that. You've got to be able to manage pressure. You've got to be able to keep calm in situations. And you've got to be able to prioritize. So not a CTO or a CIO, but I have taken that experience and applied that. I think it means that I come from a perspective of calm and of being able to listen to what's going on for you guys.
And also, Julie, I'd say from my personal experience, undoubtedly your role in the police would have had, in reality, much more pressure and more consequence than that of a CIO. It's just everyone in the world they're in, it amplifies the pressure they're under. But in absolute terms, my personal opinion would be you're leading that. And I think when you look for a coach, you want to, this is me personally speaking, but I want to have a coach who, if we go to the sporting analogy, maybe won the gold medal or silver or bronze, got a podium position in something. There's an angle of not just advice and reflection, but also of some sort of leadership and some sort of example of I've walked the walk. I'm not just talking the talk, which I think is probably, isn't that sort of central to coaching generally, that you are bringing something of yourself to the table. It's not just, isn't there a bit of a risk that you take, you sort of, you say something about yourself and then the other person says something about themselves, and that kind of gets the trust going. Is that right? Because
in the way that, how do you build rapport? Build rapport because we are meeting somebody where they are and we're likening our situation to their situation. So yeah, it's not about, in coaching, I'm not there to say, oh, I did it this way, so you should do it that way. But those experiences help me to ask the right questions. They help me to dive into the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that mean that it can unlock your thinking. So it's not about overlaying it. It's about knowing where to ask those questions.
The consistent theme with everyone who comes to CTIO 101 is they have a passion for what they do, which is really apparent, Julia, in your area. But I just wanted to ask you if you could articulate what's drawn you to coaching. What on earth were you thinking? Sorry, I don't mean it like that. But what's kind of drawn you into that space, the attraction for you personally?
Drew me into coaching was an experience of being coached, seeing coaches in action. Because I was actually, totally vulnerable and honest. I was in a really bad place at the time. Boss that I didn't really get on with. And I didn't understand why I didn't get on with them as well. That was an interesting, I do now. At the time, I thought that person was, only like the devil, and get my head around it, and it was affecting my work. And I was a really confident, capable officer at the time. And it's amazing how much that actually affected me, the stress, the anxiety of not being able to work through what was going on. And then wonderful, in the police said to me, we'll send you on a course. And I experienced coaching on that course for the first time. And I'd never seen anything like it. I was like, what the hell's going on? Why aren't they telling me the answers? Which was quite annoying, but in first instance. But so I realised what they were doing. They were helping me to unpack what was going on in my mind, unpack what was going on in the situation, and kind of take a step back out of the being in it and so stressed about it, and looking. I always say, John, looking in as if you were watching yourself on TV. So being dissociated from it. And that ability to be able to do that with a coach is amazing because you see things differently, because you can step out, you're less emotionally attached, and you can make faster decisions and see what's really going on and then move forwards. And that's how I started to learn coaching. And literally from that day, I was like, I need to get into this. And that's when I started training. So I was still a police officer when I started my coach journey and did a lot of it inside policing.
You talk about that watching yourself on telly kind of analogy.
Yeah.
That reminds me of mindfulness. I mean, I'm no expert, but there are some very famous apps for mindfulness. And on the road, I've used them occasionally, maybe after a very stressful day of traveling, that sort of thing. And just that ability to sort of, like you say, take a step back and look at what's happening almost from a slightly separated position is very powerful. So Julie, we're talking about your coaching, and one of the key things about coaching that I've read in the research I've done for this session is that you should also, when you're looking at a coach, is try and understand what their underlying philosophy is, because that can be a thing that you can really chime into. And I know you've got a strong underlying philosophy that you use in your coaching. Would you like to sort of talk us through that core philosophy?
Yeah, acting on the fact that my specific area of coaching is around impact and influence and around communication skills and all of those things. And so one of the things I like to do is I use analogies a lot, but I like to make things really simple. And so if we were to take, here you are a CTO or here you are, whoever you are, you want to have more impact and influence and I'm here to coach you, then I want, first of all, to come from a philosophy of why do people do or don't do what you want them to do? Because at the end of the day, if we understand that, then for every situation we can look at, we can diagnose, we can unpack the jigsaw puzzle of, okay, how do I make that better? Yeah. Use the philosophy of can't do, won't do, don't do, is that people either can't do what you want them to do, or they won't do what you want them to do, or they just damn well do what you want them to do. Explain those three things. So can't do sounds fairly simple. So let's start with that one. So either I don't have the skill or I don't have the confidence to do the thing that you want me to do. Okay. So if I'm CTO and I want to influence somebody or I want to get them to do something, if I can't do it, or if they can't do it, then it could be for one of those two reasons. Is that your doorbell?
Apologies, I've muted the mic. It was going off just like some sort of party going on. Someone in the house will be shushing people, so apologies for that.
It's all right. You want me to do either I don't know how to, or I have the confidence to go ahead and do that. But there's these other two which I'm really interested in, which is, first of all, won't do. Now, won't do, John, is like, not going to do this because it's you. Okay, so this is a personal, a relationship thing. And therefore, I choose not to do it. Even if I could, I choose not to because I don't have the trust or the relationship, or I just don't like you. Therefore, I won't do it, which is a very different reason from something about me personally, about my skill. And then the third point is don't do. And you might think, well, that's the same, but it's not at all the same. The difference is I don't agree with your cause. I don't agree with why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, so I don't agree with your philosophy. I don't agree with your passion. I don't agree with your purpose. And therefore I choose not to do it. So I've got a different agenda. Again, a choice. Okay. So we need to know why that is. And so when we look at impact and influence, the way I work and the philosophy is run around those things, which is, well, how do I change from can't do, won't do, don't do, to can do, wants to, and will do? And so it's the jigsaw puzzle of what skills do I need to make that happen? And that's how the program that I'm running is set up in terms of the Impact Accelerator, which is what do I need to be able to influence those things?
So Julie, that's fascinating because I know we also talked about the context of this impact in a CIO's or CTIO's first 100 days.
Yeah.
And what you've just said there to me, I've absolutely recognized this in a new role, going into a new role where your engineering teams are worried about the skills that they have, or there might be a gap between skills about the whole team. That in technology terms, it doesn't surface itself really obviously as a can't do. What it often surfaces itself as is you get solutions that aren't quite appropriate because the engineers have created something that they can do rather than gone for the solution that maybe should have been done. And nobody wants, as an engineer or any profession, wants to feel like they are missing a skill that makes them feel vulnerable. But there's a reality in technology, and I'm sure it applies to other professions as well, but particularly in technology, the pace of change is moving so quickly. They can't do, the keeping your skills up to date. It's just a constant push. And then because it's you, this is brilliant because you're a new CIO
Exactly.
or a CTO. You've come in, nobody knows you. Why you? Or there could be some sort of negative comment about the predecessor or all this sort of senior higher ups, all this sort of stuff. So there's an absolute need to establish your authenticity and you can't tell people why it's you. They've got to kind of believe it, haven't they? They've got to go through a process of trusting you're seeing something in your actions. And then the cause, I think, is, again, it's fantastic because it's so simple, but it's actually really sophisticated.
That's me all over.
The saying, which is, excuse me for the length of this letter, it would have been a lot shorter had I had longer to write it. So by boiling it down to those three, it is a lot to unpack. But on the cause side, I can see several connections with cause with technology teams.
Oh, yeah.
One could be literally the company purpose. There could just be a disassociation at that level. Mm-hmm. And these could be going on at the same time. There's not one or the other, but the other one could be the way technology is perceived in this company. We're the folks that switch things off and on. We're responsible for all the legacy stuff that doesn't work. That sort of negative, why do I need to change my password? All these sort of negative views can also affect the cause. So, goodness me, Julie, you've just given me, this is like those three areas to hone in on, and this is what you're saying, isn't it? This is where you can create your impact.
Exactly. It's like being a detective. It's like, take it back to policing, why not? It is because what you're saying is what's really going on. That's what you're asking, to happen. And to be able to look at a situation and go, I need to fix this situation in some way, or probably arrest somebody that way. But here we want to fix this situation. We want to make it easier. We want people to do the thing we want them to do. We want them to enjoy it. We want them to buy our stuff or invest in us or whatever it might be. But so with the cause, the massive thing is like I said, it's a bit like being a detective. If I'm looking at like what's going on, how is this happening, and what do I need to do to fix it? The problem is often that we jump to what do I need to do to fix this thing, and we press all the buttons we possibly can, not knowing what they are. And so what we're doing here is we're saying, stop for a second and ask yourself three simple questions. Is it them in terms of their skill or their confidence? Is it me? Am I, let's just say, a nice person and you don't mind there? Is it the fact that they don't think it's the right thing to do? So it's nothing to do with me, but is it the right thing to do? When you start to do that, then that's going to give you three routes of what do I need to do? And then you can break it down even further, like you were just saying. Well, is it the cause, the whole company? Like, I don't like working for this company because I don't like their values or something like that, or I think they make too much money or whatever it is, I don't know. Or is it like, well, my department's gone to pot now and we used to do it nicely and I don't like it like this anymore and I preferred it the way I do. Something a little bit, perhaps a little bit more personal, but still to do with the way in which we do what we do. And so start going into branches, you're starting to work out the clues of what's wrong and how can I fix it? And then you can look at yourself and say, right, okay, if it's me, I need to do differently. And you get conscious of how you are. If it's the cause, do they understand it? Do they agree with it? Or have they never seen it? I mean, crikey, so many times we see, for the company, the strategies and things like that people, and they're on their computers tapping away, have never even seen. So how can they believe in a cause they haven't seen? So it might not be that they don't agree. It's just they might not know or understand how that actually boils down to what they do on a daily basis. So there's lots of different things. And that's what we do in the course is we're saying we're going down these branches, let's say, and then we're looking at specifically, okay, so have you told them we're going down that cause branch at the moment, but have you told them what it is? Do they agree with it? Did they come up with that? Or did you just, we were talking earlier on about first 100 days. Did you just completely overlay that with what was already there? And so they're like, hang on a second, what's going on? So there's lots of reasons within each of those branches as to why the thing you want to do isn't going to happen. Because
your detective analogy, understanding what's really going on, a couple of things that you've said there that have chimed with me. If you look at a large project, and I think your philosophy scales at any level. You can apply it, the CIO can apply it to their whole organization, could apply it to at a team level, but also could apply it to all the important stakeholders as well, folks that are receiving, particularly automation, because automation can be very invasive, or invasive might be the wrong word, but very disruptive to people's day-to-day. So again, and the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because when something isn't working, if a program isn't delivering, it's not always because of a technology problem. It's not because we haven't worked out how to scale the number of sessions that we can produce for a consumer-facing portal beyond 100,000. I mean, you do get problems like that. But I think this is the one where you can get I've forgotten the term for it, but it's almost like the sort of invisible resistance. If those folks, if you've got those, well, any one of those three, but worst case, all three, you can have the best technical solution, project, business case, and all the rest of it, but you'll just be sitting there going, well, why isn't it happening? And people can lob hand grenades in, can't they? And actually, I don't want to say it like that, because it sort of almost sounds like they're at fault, but they're not. It's because you haven't walked down the path in their shoes to really understand where they're coming from. And actually, if you can decode that, things can be a lot better. Is that right?
I think decoding is a really good word for it, really, because it's a puzzle. And sometimes we're looking at it thinking, oh, it's about the technology. I hear sometimes, frustration, when it isn't working, when the project's not working, as a CTO, CIO, whatever you are, to be honest, anybody, when your project is not working, you feel frustrated. To be honest, that's exactly when you need a coach, to be honest, because you need to come out of that. Because the more frustrated you get because things aren't working, so you're like, I don't know why I'm not working. So I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm going to fill in the blanks, which are probably wrong, because you're not stopping for long enough to say, oh, what's going on? Why aren't you happy? And if you don't stop, you still don't know the answer. So I like your Brene's answer, is that you're pressing buttons. I think, my analogy would be around like you're sitting at one of those old fashioned computer screens with the flashing lights, and you're just pressing everything to see what's going to happen, instead of just saying, hang on a minute, turn it off and start again. Ask yourself some better questions. Why?
Julia, I've got just a little brainwave. I don't know what you're like. If I don't say them out loud, I forget them, or I write them down.
Go on.
But one of the things that you've just struck me is it's really apparent when you're talking about coaching that you're coaching individuals, you're coaching other human beings. Yeah, that's the sort of coaching approach. But actually, I think you could apply your coaching philosophy to a delivery program. Do you see what I mean? Because if obviously all delivery, everything is made up of people, so you're still coaching towards people, but you're framing it maybe at a program level. So if you take on the task of coaching the CIO, CTO, and all the other IOs, there's a lot going on, and you're going to achieve, you can still move things forwards and it'll be great, but you could also very specifically sort of almost say, give me a program where sort of it's a bit of a mystery as to why you're not making as much progress as you think and you've sort of exhausted quite a few of the technical routes. This is the sort of thing that could really unpack. I mean, they call it business change, don't they?
Yeah.
And change management. But, in my experience, a lot of it's all based on human beings being lined up and running in the same direction,
or not, as the case may be,
or not, or absolutely, or herding cats is one of the expressions. But what's your thought on that?
That's what, if I'm an agent of change, take me out of this for a minute as a coach, but if I'm in the position where I'm running a program, agent of change, and I love that herding cats, because if you're not careful, that's what you get. You get a whole bunch of people running around doing their thing. Okay, so capable, and this is the dangerous part. I talk about can't do. Well, most of the time they can do, but we're just sending them off into all different directions, or they're choosing their own direction. So it is like herding cats. And so it's because what I'm saying is, whether we do it for a CTO or whoever it might be, saying apply this to what's going on in any situation, including the whole program. So if we were to say, like, look at this, is this a can't do, won't do, or don't do? Or hang on, they're running around like headless chickens doing their own thing. That's a bit of a don't do thing. So what is going on there? Oh, we haven't told them where we're supposed to be going. We haven't even asked them to buy into it yet. So they are like a herd of cats, because they're clever people doing their own thing. They're running their own agenda. And
so there's a management style called command and control. It's normally referred to in the change context as not particularly favorable. It's sort of but there is an element of command and control when you're having to do something without thinking, urgent situation, without thinking, being able to do act really effectively without hesitation and all that. It's got a place for it. But I think when command and control is used in a business context, it's not used in that positive sense. It's used more in the just do what I say kind of approach.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about a group of folks who are in they don't do it because they don't believe in the cause, I think often they're not even on the list to be communicated to.
Exactly.
They're kind of just taken as they should just do it.
Just do it. Yeah.
Do you see that? So is part of the coaching sometimes opening up the CIO to being a little bit more people-centric?
Communicative. Yes, absolutely. So when look at I'm just going to break down the three areas that our program works on. First thing we're saying is you have to be confidently connected to the people that you are around, whether that be your boss, your peers, your team. Okay, you need to have a relationship with them. They need to want to. Going by that want to, you need to have a relationship with them, but you also need to be able to be relevant and inspiring to them. They need to know what's in it for them. They need to understand and be inspired by what you're talking about and that cause and those things. You need to have experience of you that makes them want to join you as well. So they've got to come together with you on all of those things. But if you don't even tell them, the proverbial phrase, what is it, fed on something I can't say on this podcast probably, and in the dark, that's probably how they feel. Is if you don't tell them, how can they buy into it? And so what you do when you don't tell people where you're trying to go, let me ask you a question, John. This is my favourite question. Is like if I were going on holiday and I came to you and I said, John, I've bought this and I'll get you a surprise. What's the first thing you're going to say to me?
Well, not as a surprise as me. I didn't realise we were going on
holiday,
Julie.
On holiday, but
I'll have to have a chat with the missus. But no, sorry. So we're going on holiday. Surprise.
Yeah, you're probably going to want to know where are we going.
No, well, yeah, I suppose you're leading the witness a little bit, if you don't mind me saying, Julie. But I could say, well, I'd like to know where we're going.
What else would you say, just out of interest? Because I would think my first thing would be where we're going and who are we going with.
Yeah, no, I'd be really surprised because I'm someone who plans so much. Those sorts of things don't happen to me. So I would say, yeah, I would want to know. Okay, after they're getting over the initial shock, yeah, where are we going? No, what? Why have you surprised me? That would be probably the question.
Well, there's another question. We won't do that. But if you're saying we're going to go somewhere, we're going on a trip, or we're going out somewhere, we're going to dinner, or we're going to do something.
Yes.
The question is where do I go?
Yeah.
Going. And for me, it's like, you don't know where you're going. You don't know how to pack for your holiday. You're going to end up packing your skiing clothes when you need a bikini, or you pack the bikini when you need your skiing clothes. And you don't feel comfortable. And for me, I'll be having my arms folded saying, I'm not doing it until you tell me where we're going, because I want to be able to have the right stuff with me. I want to be able to buy into it, and I want to know I want to do that thing. And so it's like that when you've got people in it who are kept in the dark about things. So if you don't tell them, then how can they go fast in any one direction? I always talk about, like, if you imagine that your business is a boat and you're trying to take that boat to America, you're asking these people to help you make the boat go faster. Okay. Well, if I don't know where the boat's going, or I don't know where I'm going on holiday, I don't go fast in any one direction. I go around in circles. I do what I think is right. I do what I'm used to doing. I do what I'm comfortable doing, or I make my own stuff up. Because nobody likes coming to work. Honestly, nobody likes coming to work doing a bad job. So we do what we think is the right thing. But if you don't tell them the agenda, then they are going to make it up. And that's when you get herding cats.
Yeah, and I've also heard that described as wheel spin, and that the phrase I'm not particularly keen on, but it's like the busy fool, because you're, in the whole scheme of things, you're doing lots of things, but you're not making that contribution.
No, because we don't know where we're going.
I wanted to just briefly go back to persuading the CIO who's on the people journey about how important it is to communicate with their team. Beyond it's about respecting people and it's just a good thing to do, because I fully subscribe to that. But that group, if you wanted to be a little bit more pointed about it, you would say that group actually possesses a huge amount of power in the organization. If your delivery relies on 80 professionals all pulling in the same direction, if you haven't got them on side, it's basically, that's the power that's pushing that's powerful enough to push your program off target.
Who is it that said no man is an island? I can't remember now. Somebody clever. if you think about it, if you are the one who's trying to do everything, there's only 24 hours in a day, so you can only do so much. Your job as a leader is to leverage people that you have. So you've got 80 lots of things happening. You've got 80 things going. And so the more clear they are that they're going in the same direction as you together, back to making the boat go faster, imagine they're all putting their oar in at the same time. If they're putting their oar in with the same direction, and they're all working and they know where they're going and they're all doing it, fully, then you're going to go faster, but in the right direction. The minute you take the communication out, some will be rowing really fast still, but they'll be rowing in the wrong direction. Some of them will be like, well, I don't know where I'm going, so I'm going to stop. And they'll be sticking their oar in the air, not wanting to put it in because they don't know which way to put it in. So they dabble and they mess about. Maybe that's like your spinning wheels. Some of them will be down by saying, "Oh, I'm going to go in the other direction." They're going to be sticking their oar right in and it the other way because they don't want to play that game. And so what you end up with is this gaggle of people rowing in different directions. So the communication, you may think, oh, they don't need to know about our strategy. They don't need to know any of this stuff. But actually, they need to feel part of it. They need to feel that they can buy into that. As much as you want investors to buy into what you're trying to achieve, they need to buy into what you're trying to achieve. Because the minute that they think, do you know what, this is a really good thing, I really believe in this, that's when you get somebody who, yes, you're going to pay them and you should be paying them really well, but they're not there for the money. They're there for the thrill of the ride, the end result. They're there to make something better that they believe in as much as you believe in. But how can they believe in it or buy into it if you haven't told them?
Yes.
Or you tell them half the story, or you lie, and that's worst case, and you be quiet. And so
this podcast is sponsored by Fairmont Recruitment, leading the way in technology recruitment across the UK and Europe.
I call it drawing the strings. If like this, the big picture, how do I link what I do on a daily basis? I'm about this one of your 80 here. What do I go left? I used to say this a lot. Do we go left or right out of the police station? You get your car and you can go anywhere you like. Do I go left or right out of the police station? Well, I don't know unless I know what the priorities are, unless I know what the strategy is, unless I know what the vision is. Now, the minute I know that there's lots of little old ladies getting burgled in Hatfield or somewhere like that, then I know, right, well, I can now choose. I can make good decisions in the business. Even as one of your 80 people, I can make really good decisions if I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I couple that with my amazing technical skill, and now I can make good decisions. Well, how about that for leverage? So now I don't have to keep having somebody knock on my door and say, what's next? What next? Because all these 80 people are going around going, well, I know this is the right thing to do because I know where we're going. So I'll just get on with this and I'll make some really good decisions. So it's about a little bit about can do, but not confident. Well, this is some of the stuff where the confident comes in because now I'm like, okay, I can make good decisions because I know they'll be right. I've got some certainty about my ability and my direction, which means, I will take a risk because I'm like, I know that's the right thing. I think that's good. I'm not going to go and knock on Bob's door every 5 seconds and annoy him because, or her, as I'm certain. And therefore, you've got a very efficient group of people working in a direction that they know without you having to keep pushing the buttons all the time. So say about why should we communicate? Why should we care? There's a massive what's in it for me, as in like what's in it for them. You're going to get people who don't have to keep asking you what to do all the time.
I've heard that described as heuristics. So you give people enough information, so like you say, that they're able to operate to a large extent independently, but even though they're operating independently, their choices of what they do is pushing or pulling all in the right direction, in the same direction. You've got that. So that's sort of like gives them the freedom, like you say, to work with their own initiative, which I would have thought is going to be more fulfilling as well, because nobody likes to have a situation where, okay, I've done this task, now I'm going to go back and ask about that. I mean, that's a horrible way to work. And I know people, even at very senior levels, do still have that experience in some instances, which I find really, well, it's not so much shocking because I don't think there's anything that can shock us anymore. But certainly you think, well, this has got to be the end of an era of how we work with each other.
Because you're de-skilling, you're demotivating and de-skilling people, because if you take it away from them for long enough, then what you find is they stop trying. So they will
Yes.
just come and ask you, what's next? What's next? And they'll do exactly what you tell them to do. I mean, exactly. Which give people the ability to make decisions within the business, within a context of the direction that you want to go. So you give them a framework in which they can do that. Then you're safe and they're safe. You're not just saying off you go and make every decision you like. But if you do that, then you give them, respecting them, you're giving them confidence in themselves, and you're giving them confidence in making those decisions. And therefore they grow, they get more excited about what they're doing. They'll come up with even better ideas as well. Again, you're going to look much better if you do this, because they want to be there. You know, they want to be part of the team that's going somewhere that they know where they're going.
Let's just check where we are in the can't do, won't do, don't do.
Yeah.
Where are we in that process in terms of covering that off?
The top level. Okay. And so when we're working, we have to go down those 3 branches. And so it things down into 9 areas within those 3 areas that will basically give you the skill to be able to do the decoding, as you call it. Okay. And then so that's the problem. Now I know what to do about it. So we're changing your mindset, and we're looking at behaviors. So we're looking at how I show up, so that then when I decode it, I'm like, okay, I get it. I need to do this differently. So it's about getting connected and understanding people. So first thing we need to do is understand who on earth is in the room. So we're our audience, but I don't mean thousands of people in front of you. I mean, whoever you come into contact with, understanding the people in the room. And you, John, asked me earlier on about, are we all the same? You know, I'll type, we look at behavioral profiling within the program, something called DISC, which I absolutely love. And we look at 4 main types of behavioral profile and communication styles, not personality. It's just the way in which we work. And we look at those people. What does that tell us about how we might need to communicate with them, or how we might need to motivate them, or how we might need to look after them a little bit differently, all those things. So it enables us to build a connection with them. So we start to look at, let's get to know the people in what I call the people in the room. Yeah. And so that's the first thing, is giving us some tools, because we can't just, we could with a finger in the air, but let's give ourselves a tool that gives us some ideas of understanding how people might be showing up. That may be the same as us, or it may be different to us. And within that, how do we celebrate those differences, I'm going to say, okay, rather than just thinking that you need the same clone of yourself in your business every single time, which you don't. Then we look at growing the relationships and the trust. What do I need to do to build trust and those relationships? And you asked me earlier on about being a coach, and I think that CTIO as a coach is a great option. Here, what we're looking at is, how do you build rapport? How do you meet them where they are and take them where you want to go? And the only happens if you build trust. So we need to look at actively and consciously taking an interest in people and building trust. Okay. We also we need, within that building connected with your audience, let's say, is we need to look at what happens when it doesn't work. So when you've got a bit of conflict and you've got a bit of resistance, which is probably quite a lot when you've got change and all things. So we need to understand, how do I deal with conflict? How do I say what needs to be said? How do I deal with difficult people, which there could be a fair few? How do I have the confidence to do that? Because a lot of the time, especially I think in this kind of world, we tend to avoid some of that, and it ends up as passive aggressive problems that get more old and hairy and we don't deal with. So we need to, within that building trust, we need to be able to say what needs to be said, and in a way that builds relationships rather than breaks them down.
And Julie, I was just going to think on that point. It is a bit of a cliche, but they say if you can get the person who's most vocal against something to turn around and go, actually, I think it's a great idea. They're very credible, and they become this sort of power to support the process. But I'm not suggesting that you sort of nefariously hypnotize them to come around. What I see with those folks is people who are still got the passion for where they work. They still care. And sometimes if you're in a scenario where you are engaging with your audience, as you say, and you don't get any resistance at all, you can sort of think, oh, okay, well, actually, I am getting resistance because they're just going through the motion. They're sort of the silent
it's the
resistance. People are there doing email. They're not really in the room, as it were.
In terms of the connection side of things and building relationships, that's the kind of areas that we're working on in the program, and we split that down. We then move on to intentional impact, that second area. I'm doing intentional impact is about how do I show up? Okay, so this other stuff is about understanding people and sort of, but this is about me and my behavior. So I don't know if you've ever a mood hoover in the room, where somebody sucks the energy out of the room, or, do all their problems and worse when they come in the room rather than when they leave. What we're talking about here is that me. Actually, this is where you definitely need a coach because it's not the easiest thing is to say, well, what am I? Who am I, let's say, and what's my impact? So here, when I talk about intentional impact, first thing we need to know is where am I? What is my impact? So we look at feedback, getting an understanding of, well, what do different kinds of people think of me?
Yes.
And that's not always the easiest thing. But this is where it requires that trust that we were talking about earlier.
I was going to say, you're in the diplomatic team for that one.
Yeah, the hard
I've had moments in my career where I've had that sharing, and I found it quite challenging to start off with. But then afterwards, I thought, okay, now I understand that. And often it's completely disassociated with what I was trying to convey. So folks who have worked with me, particularly on really intense projects, sometimes throw chocolate bars at me, which obviously can't do anymore on a virtual meeting. But they always used to sort of give me a chocolate bar to make sure I had, like, my sugar levels were in check. That was something that I didn't realize I did. And the other thing I noticed more from when we're on video was that I sometimes have a resting face, which is not, it isn't the sort of face that's saying, yes, come on, speak to me. I want to listen. It's quite and that's just something that happens when I think. So
sometimes you have to say to people like, are you happy? Are you okay? You don't look happy. And they're like, yeah, really happy. I'm good. I'm just thinking, you're like, yeah, can you tell me your face?
Yes.
We don't know what the output is sometimes because we're in the moment. We're doing the thing we're doing. Like you said, we're either thinking or I don't know what we're doing. But whatever we do, we often do on autopilot because we're in the moment. And when you drive to work, if ever we drive to work ever again, and you drive to work, sometimes you get there and you look around and think, how did I get here? Because you don't remember the drive because you're on autopilot. And so we also don't remember perhaps how we drove. And this is the same thing. So we've got to get to the point where we're actually honest, because I could give you, what I think my behavior is like. Yes, I'm a really nice person and I respect people all the time or listen to people. And then other people are like, no, you don't. No, you don't do that. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of a thing called the Jahari Window, but I love the Jahari Window. Yeah. So that's where we might use this and that to help people to understand is that there's stuff you know about yourself to be true and instinct phase, but you have no clue how you're showing up in that one moment. Okay.
Yes.
And the problem is that people are watching you. Okay. Those 80, you just said are in your team, are all watching you. Okay.
Yes.
And this is where we get to this won't do thing if we're not careful, because if they don't like what's happening or it makes them feel bad or they don't understand why you did what you did. So let's go back to your resting face again. If they didn't have that conversation with you, but what we do is we in gaps. So I'm going to look at your face and go, well, he doesn't look very happy with me because we have a lot of stuff going on inside that will probably apply it to us. And so we're like, maybe he's not happy with what I've said, or maybe he's not happy with what I did, or my work's not good enough, or we'll extrapolate what you've done and think it's up to something they've done, which then means that there's the conflicts starting. Okay, there's resistance and you make them feel bad, even though you didn't mean to. And they don't know that you didn't mean to. So here we then get resistance. And then they change their behavior because of it, because behavior breeds behavior. Okay. So if we don't get conscious of what we're doing and what we're showing up as, can't learn that somebody thinks that we are in a mood or we're grumpy or whatever the thing is, we don't even know that they think that's what's going on. And they've just made up a story in their head about the reason for that, which then impacts on their ability to work, on their ability to do this thing they want to do, or to have a relationship with you, that environment. And so we have to get conscious of those things. We have to ask people, how am I showing up? Which is super important. So we do that. We hold your hand through that.
Julia, on that, just a couple of anecdotes, because it's really, everything you're saying is striking such a strong chord with my own experience. I've been fortunate enough to implement technology projects all around the world. And so not only have you got the frame of reference of the organization you're in, but also the kind of the national framework.
Oh, yeah.
Over in the States, I was involved on a project, and the pep talk I gave the team was a pep talk that works really well in London. It was pretty direct.
Right.
It was getting into a lot of the negatives, but in a sense of, look, this is what we've got to fix kind of way.
Yeah.
And the feedback I'd got was that the team were kind of ready to quit. I mean, this is literally, I'd only just met them. The culture was much more of a, but we can do it. And let's think of the sort of, I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso on Netflix. He's this amazing American football coach that comes in and coaches a British football team. So it's a really interesting kind of clash of styles.
Yes.
So culturally, there was something missing to kind of to open that up.
Yeah.
But there is a sort of an inner Ted Lasso. You definitely need to have a look, Julie. I think you'll find it quite funny. But then if you just did the opposite, okay, so imagine you've traveled from the States and you've come to England and you're doing exactly the same discussion. Mm-hmm. That you might get accused of being more David Brent in The Office. Yeah. The only way I can work it out is just be authentically me, which is somewhere between Ted Lasso and David Brent, I think, rather than trying to act out I must do it in this way. But when you say to me, John, you do need to change some of these things. How do I change and still remain authentic? Yeah. Because otherwise you throw in a question like at the end of a sentence. I go, oh, sorry, Julie. How are you? It's really obvious that I haven't even asked you.
I haven't my tick list of what I'm supposed to be asking you.
That kind of, how do you do that?
I want you to change who you are. Who are you? Okay, so you put something out there, look at the feedback and understand, well, did that work or not? And it's not about changing your whole personality. It's about saying, did that serve me? That behavior, because behavior is not you. Behavior is just a thing that you do. Okay, so did it serve me in this situation? So let's take you in America. It's like, I'm going to go and do it this way. Does that actually serve? No, it didn't serve me. Okay, what might serve me? How can I adapt what I do here? Okay, and if the answer is yes, it did, and then you do more of it. That's how we learn from when we're little, isn't it? Really, we try something out, and if it didn't kill us, we do it again probably. So what we're asking for is to get feedback. So we're saying what's working, what's not. We're not saying don't be you, but what we are saying is be sensitive to the needs of what's going on around you. A big part of what we're looking at over here is why do people get to what you're trying to do is because you have to take them with you. You have to fulfill their needs as much as your needs. It has to be a win-win situation. And the way to make it a win-win is to be perceptive and look at that and say, okay, is that working? Did that resonate with them? No, it didn't. Okay, what do they actually need? And it might be your Americans needed more rah and feel more positive about something rather than being told it's all nightmare.
And actually, Julie, as you just said that, we do have an audience across the Atlantic. So just for all listeners, either side of the Atlantic, it was a general perception, but I don't want to do a national stereotype. There's definitely folks either side of the pond who will want more of a positive than there's a kind of a style, isn't there, that you need to adapt to each individual. So I didn't want to kind of stereotype our colleagues in the States or indeed in the UK.
Like stereotyping anybody. So taking us
absolutely.
Back to that behavioural profile, it's about looking and getting feedback. And that's exactly the point we're trying to make, is that you can go, if you want to go to America and do a stereotype thing, then you are going to fail because that's not what they need. You need to ask yourself, is it working? What's the feedback I'm getting? And adjusting on that feedback loop. Yeah. Wherever you are looking for information to make your next decision as to how you go about things. And you have your preferred style, let's say, and it might be a different style to when you're at home with the husband, wife, or significant other, or any of those things. It might be a different style, but you have a preferred style, but it doesn't always work in every situation. And if you want to be a leader, you have to be perceptive about that. The people who don't change their style or adapt their style, let's say, for a situation, are the people that just say, well, I'm me and you all have to change around me. And they're the people that we don't want to work with. Yeah. Absolutely. And so with this, what we do, if you can just imagine, is not to change who you are or how you are. You step into something, you step forward into something, you adapt, and you can step back. Because we're all in that, we all have our flow, and your flow might be a certain way, but you can do differently. You don't have to be different, you can do different. Okay.
Yeah.
And you step in, you're maybe a bit out of flow. It's not the way you would normally do it, but you know that's the right way to do it for that thing. And then you can step back into where you are. But it's that adaptability that makes you a leader. design what we want instead. So we kind of started to work towards it, which is once you know where you are and what's good, what's working, or what do you want to stop, start, or continue. And so we then look at, okay, what do I want to change? How do I go about being slightly different and doing slightly different in the context of what's necessary for the situation I'm in, for my audience? Okay, so I have to be adult enough about it to be able to take this on board. That's what I want to say. So I have seen a lot of people throw a tantrum at this point, which is, I don't want to change. Why should I change? Why would it be lovely if both did and both adapted? But someone has to go first, and you're the leader, and you're being coached by me. So it's your turn. So there's the tough love bit coming out of me there.
When you get that sort of reaction, that means you're very close to affecting change in the individual,
Yes.
because that's the
It
point
hurts.
where they are actually being vulnerable. And they always say for certain types of feedback, you feedback about the task, not about the individual. You say, this isn't about you. This is about we've delivered, or so you sort of decouple the two. But actually, with this sort of coaching, you are getting a little bit more into
This is about you.
We are having that conversation.
Yes, it's about how you show up. So I'm not trying to change people's personality. I'm trying to help them to see that behavior isn't productive.
Yes, and how they present themselves. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it hurts sometimes. This piece hurts. What we need to look at is a little bit of transactional analysis around the parent-adult-child model, which you're familiar with. But we have those ego states of we turn up either as a parent and we tell everybody what to do regardless, as the child, where we just sit there and wait for something. We're talking about waiting for the next thing. Yeah, we can force people into that. If we turn up as parent, we end up treating people like children, and they start acting like it. Like people who don't want to make a decision. Well, that's child mode. You've put them there. Yeah.
Yes.
But we can show up in child mode where we're not ready to be told, if we don't like it, we throw a tantrum, we don't want to change, and we don't see the correctness in something, let's say. So where we need to be an adult, which sounds obvious, doesn't it, really? But believe you me, it doesn't happen very often, because people swing between parent, adult, child in working environments all the time, especially when their emotions get the better of them. Okay, and
that's interesting. So it's when your emotions kick in, that's when you're more susceptible to taking those relationships.
If you're not logical about things, you're emotional about them. And then don't get me wrong, emotional is good. To be able to have emotion is good. But when you're not in control of it and you get angry, or you get, you're fearful and all those things, it can push us in these directions. So what we're trying to do is...
That's when I eat a chocolate bar, Julie.
Yeah,
that's
your child mode.
Okay.
And mine too.
Fair play.
Yeah, but like when you see people, oh my gosh, in meetings or something, fold their arms because they didn't like something that somebody said. I have to do it now. But they fold their arms and they stick their lip out and they're like, I'm not going to say any more in this meeting because I didn't like that and I've got the hump. That's not adult mode, okay?
And we've all done it.
Of course we have.
I would like to say in my defense, one of the things my children observe is that when I'm thinking, my chin goes forwards. So I think it's just I don't have enough processing power to run everything. So when the brain kicks in, everything else just goes a little bit off or goes into low power mode. That's my defense.
But that's really interesting, John, actually. Sorry, just on that note, okay, that if that's what happens to you and your children have given you feedback on that, which is that's happening there. So imagine that was your staff.
Yeah.
And you were like, they said to you, like, why are you always grumpy? Had a meeting and you're thinking, I'm not grumpy. I'm just thinking. Don't leave it there.
Yes.
Right. Because if you leave it there, that people fill in the gap. All right.
Yes, of course.
If you don't say, oh, actually, no. When I'm thinking, my chin sticks out, I do look grumpy, but I want you to know that I'm not grumpy at that point. I'm thinking.
Yes.
You'll see these people go like, oh, right.
Know what they think, Julie? They go, oh, you must think a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But
no, I get it. No, I totally get it, because you're just assuming and you're still not alive to how obvious it is and how it's making other people feel.
Yeah, you're thinking, well, I just do that because I'm thinking. But that's not enough.
Yeah.
You have to have the conversation, because then people can say, oh, okay, I don't need to get upset about that anymore, because now I'm not trying to fill in the gap and make my own reality up. I now know that he's just thinking. Great. Yeah. So this is where this communication comes in. Okay, so we need to be in adult mode, because otherwise what you might have done in that situation is either told your kids off for being cheeky, or if it was your staff, you'd be like, well, what do you? Get on with your work. and you're not open to this, what we might deem criticism, but actually it's an inquiry, it's a nice understanding. It's like, well, I don't understand, why are you like this, So
Yes.
when we're in adult mode, we can take that feedback and say, okay, that's a misunderstanding. I need to explain that, or I need to change. I need to stop doing something, if it's depending on what it is. So the last piece in the impactful side of things, I think, is about learning to step up and say what needs to be said in a way that people can understand you. So we look at speaking with confidence, like not staying silent about things you really should be speaking about, and articulate it in a way that people can take it on board as well. And so diving into, how do I speak up so people listen? How do I bore people witless, to be quite honest, is one thing. Or am I overwhelming people, or am I giving them too much information? I did a blog about this the other day, about simplify to amplify. And that's one of the things that we look at in here, is how do I speak with confidence so that people actually listen? So that's part of that impact, is using the feedback loop, is saying, how am I doing, and improving on the way in which I show up through the things I say, whether that be through presentations or whether that be through meetings or email, even, actual written word.
I'd like to say I'm guilty of this, but it's just the fact that people seem to be more and more not really listening. A lot of folks seem to just be in broadcast mode. It's a little bit ironic because this is being broadcast, but you and I are having a conversation. We're listening to each other, but that listening piece and being bombarded, the impact of social media on just the whole mood music of communicating with each other. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I think you'd said social media isn't very social.
Think about the time, John, when you were actually listened to like that, and didn't just wait for their opportunity to speak. They actually listened to what you had to say. And I bet you will struggle to find a time when somebody really listened to you. Job of the coach, by the way, is listen and not having their own agenda. In reality, that's an unusual situation. And the reason why I say social media is not social is because we're all, think about Robbins does a 6 human needs. He talks about the 6 human needs. And one of those is about significance, contribution as well, but significance as well. And the need to feel heard, the need to feel like you're relevant. Well, if nobody's listening in general conversation, it's hard enough, okay? We're, jumping in and saying their thing, not really hearing what you've got to say. Then we take it to social media, and it's just like multiplied by about 1 million. Because what we see is everybody's putting stuff out there, and they're desperate. People are desperate to be heard. Okay, put stuff out there. If you're listening to this podcast, listen to my stuff because it might make me feel better. But everybody, whether it be your 15-year-olds or your 50-year-olds, we significantly want to be heard. And so when people put stuff out in media, they want a response, and as likes and all those sort of things, or comments or whatever. But we're desperate to get it. But reality is, nobody's actually listening because everybody else just wants to be heard as well. And so, because of the way social media is set up, all we're doing is going around like a little hamster wheel of just wanting to be heard all the time, yet still nobody's listening. So it is addictive in a way, because you're trying to press the dopamine button of somebody liking your thing, or if you were to translate that, what does that mean? It's the feeling of being heard. I don't know if you can hear, noticed or heard or valued or seen or any of those things. Having validation. Well, of course, then you keep going, and I think it's dangerous because we're not having good, we need to get better, but we're not having good enough face-to-face conversations where we're being heard. So we're all desperate for this stuff. So we press button and we end up feeling bad and feeling worse because still nobody's listening. And there's maybe a bit of a grim realization, somebody else just wants to put their picture in and is taking their selfies and they're pouting at the camera and they're stopping what they're doing and they're not enjoying Disney, for example, to stop and take a picture and smile at the camera with their pout and make it out like they're having a great time. And then they stop, put the camera away and go back feeling miserable and not talking to anybody because they're going to social media to get the validation that they could have got from the conversation that they could have with the people that they were with. I find a little frustrating. So for me, I think social media is not very social. If you don't build relationships, you've got to have conversations with people and you've got to be curious and genuinely curious. And taking that back to you as a leader within, as a CTIO, true, even more so here, is that being genuinely curious and interested in people and actually listening to them will build trust faster than anything else I know.
I'm not saying that I'm perfect in any way, because we all go through stages or meetings where you don't listen and you go off the boil. But when I am able to listen to folks and put that investment, obviously you do get trust over time, but what you get professionally is just an amazing insight into engineering, into software engineering. People will start to discuss where their current kind of personal cutting edge technology question is, because they'll be confident to speak to you in a point of like problem solving or something like that.
Yeah.
So what you end up doing is making available to yourself a much, much deeper seam of technical knowledge, because you're not having a superficial conversation.
They trust you and
and you're not pretending to listen. That's even worse. And so, Julie, how, with the pressures that we have with time, everything, our whole lives are ruled by the hour slots in our calendars. With the pressures of time, how do you make time to listen? Or maybe you're going to say, if you don't make time to listen, it's a false saving, because you'll end up spending more time with the consequences of not necessarily. I don't know if I've just answered my own question.
You have answered your own question, but I agree. Is that I'll go back to that thing where I said there's only 24 hours in a day. Yeah, this is about leverage. And the way to leverage is to have people help you. And the way to have people help you is that they want to and can help you. And the way they want to is because they feel respected, they feel heard, they feel validated, and they feel that you're interested in their ideas. So unless you actually listen to them, then they're going to think, well, I know the answer. This is a classic. I know the answer, but I'm not going to tell John because he doesn't listen anyway, so I'm not going to tell him.
He doesn't deserve it.
He doesn't
He's
deserve
not listening
it.
to me. Why would I do that?
No, so you go back to being what you described as a busy fool, because you're on your hamster wheel. You've got to utilize the resources that you have around you, but the only way those resources are going to help you is if they feel good about you. Is that your doorbell again? I like this.
It is. It's like I'm at the Waterloo station today.
But I've just got to tell you a funny story. You can keep this in if you like. It made me laugh yesterday. I completely embarrassed myself on a live that I was doing because I had my windows open because it was so hot. And I'm asking, a burning stove, and asking this guy to come around for ages. And he's busy, so he hasn't come round. And then my neighbour, who knows him, brought him over literally while I was in the middle of my live and put his head through the window and was like, hello.
Because you were live on LinkedIn yesterday, weren't you?
You should see it. It's just,
yeah.
I'm like,
that's brilliant. But that's excellent, because that's like live television, things like that.
It was like that bloke
happen.
who, the newsreader that had his kid coming in and he was like, and I thought, you shouldn't do that. Don't do that. You've got to incorporate the lovely kid into it, haven't you? But
and then you're then conflicted because you're in the real world with a real person who doesn't know at all the situation you're in.
No, exactly.
But you've also got your virtual world with your audience. So that's brilliant.
One of the things about me is that not trying to pout at the camera. I should, but I'm not trying to pout at the camera. I'm trying to be me because effort, really. That's the other thing about social media is how much of an effort, how stressful is it to try to be something that you're not? And this applies to anyone listening here who's a leader. You're not authentically you, and you're trying to be somebody else or pretend that you're something else, and you pretend, for example, that you have no fear or that you are perfect, and you don't let people see that side of you, just like having to put your makeup on every 5 minutes and then pretend that you're perfect is stressful and tiring, exhausting, in fact. And so I don't think people should do that. I think that you should be able to show the real you. And the funny thing is when people see the real you, they like that better than the one that makes them feel inferior. That's the other thing, because the more you can be vulnerable and show that you're just a human and you sometimes get it wrong, or you sometimes don't know what the answer is and you need their help, then they're going to be much more likely to see you as somebody who they want to help, and they can help you give you that answer, can put themselves out for you because they see that's genuine and it's vulnerable, rather than you sticking yourself on a pedestal and pretending that you don't need anything and that you are perfect, because they're not going to build that rapport with that person. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about part of the structure that goes over 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick 12 weeks for a particular reason? Do you have to build in time to reflect?
Yeah, 9 accelerators, of which I've talked about 6 so far, to set the scene. Because if you don't set context in anything, it's the same as not knowing where you're going in your vision. If you don't set context and you don't understand what you're trying to achieve, then there's no point in just diving straight into something, which I think we're quite tempted to do quite often, is just let's get in and dart. Especially certain behavioural types, they love to just get on with it. We run headlong into all of the problems. So we start off with that first module, really just assessing what is it we're trying to do and where are we going and where are we now, and have our 9 accelerators. In the middle of that, we're going to be assessing how we're doing, what we're doing, and where, what right, what's not, what do we need to adjust. And the last one is, well, what do we do with all of this now? Because we can learn all this stuff, but John, unless you apply it all the time, then it's really not worth learning.
It's theory, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why it's a coaching program as much as a learning program. Because
and if you get it out of a book, it's like this is a personal experience, frustration, trying to improve your golf by reading about it. You become really good at the theory, but sadly that doesn't really translate to the course. So you've got to actually do it, and you've got to have that visceral contact with a coach and go through real examples.
Well, and what we're focusing on here is you need to understand the concepts, the training. Yeah. So we have the modules that we go through, the trainings are all there. But doing that, as you say, is just like trying to play golf from a book. And then we have coaching sessions every week. And in between that, this is the beauty of this, is that you then go and implement. Because even the coaching session isn't worth doing if you don't do the action in between. You've got to learn the concepts, and you can learn those in the modules. You've got to have the coaching, because that's what's going to keep you accountable and is going to help you to get yourself in that adult space to make change to yourself. Okay.
Yes.
But you also have to implement in between. It's like the sandwich filling, I suppose, is that you've got to go back into your role, workplace, whatever. This thing, I'm now going to try that on board. Go in, you're going to pick somebody and go, that's relevant for that person. I am going to do something differently now. I'm going to test it. And
I've done a total of 8 years part-time study whilst working in my career. So I did 5 years part-time computer science degree, and I did 3 years part-time MBA. Those are really hard yards because you give up a lot of weekends. Summers go, it's really hard work.
Yeah.
But what was amazing about it was I was able to apply what I was learning immediately into the context of where I was working, which kind of made it even harder because the impact was so strong. I was kind of just basically going full on. So when you talk about you have the training, then you apply, I mean, personally, I would say it's one of the most powerful ways, not just to learn, but to remember everything. Because when you do something, you remember it a lot easier than just sort of writing down the theory. So that was going to be one of the questions in those 12 weeks. Are you giving me loads of homework? Have I got an assignment to write? Are you going to say to me, John, it's a 5,000 word document, and if you don't get it in on Wednesday, you're going to fail?
Think of anything worse than an essay to have to write when I've just said that actually the implementation is what we're all about now. So we have worksheets that we page A4 that says, how are you going to implement? It's not going to say exactly this, but the purpose of it is to say, what did that mean to me? What am I going to take from that? So I'm going to assess that. And what am I going to do? So I'm going to go now and speak to Bob or whatever. It's going to help. So all the worksheets there to help you to stop for a second, get off your hamster wheel and pay attention to what that you've just learned, rather than just learning it. And then our worksheets are there to give you 20 minutes of reflection or half an hour of doing something. Or can you imagine having to actually read all those essays and the effort that would be in and it would be of no value to anybody. So
I was just wondering, during the 12 weeks, are there moments where you have or you anticipate the kind of ta-da moment? Yeah. Typically, after this session, people, when they come back for the next session, they have this kind of moment of revelation, or sometimes there are moments, aren't there, where you think, oh my goodness, I was in a meeting. It literally all came together.
Yeah, and I realised that's what you were talking about, Julie. Yeah, that happens all the time. And that's where we share that, because we have a chat group. So that's the other part of it, is to have a community where we can say, I had a really bad day today because this happened and Bob was an idiot and how do I deal with that? Or share my wins. No, this was brilliant. I just realised what you meant, or something like that. So that's important to have it there, and or in the coaching session. So there's various ways of doing that, but it's important that we share as a community, because we also, that's the other way of learning, which is learning from other people. So
this approach could be applied at so many different levels. I know we focused it on the CIO, CTO, but actually could be done, those groups could be done at team level. It could be a program that you eventually work through your whole technology organization, or
Absolutely.
even the folks, you could use this program as a precursor to a big transformational change as well.
Yeah.
And everyone who goes through it, you're mitigating the risk of adoption of the technology itself. So you're getting that as in the business case. But the longer term business case is you're getting investing in people. You're going to get so many more benefits out of this as you go through your organization, because you're going to create a culture of listening and
exactly.
alignment and everything really that that you need.
Also, I would absolutely advocate that you should work through this with everybody at all those levels. But equally, you can work on pieces of this as well. For example, if you've got a bunch of people that are looking at each other like that's team A and we're team B and we're better than team A and we're not really working together collaboratively, and maybe that's people are behaving in the organization, then coming and saying, oh, let's just have a look at a few behavioral profiles. Let's do people's behavioral profile. Let's have a talk about that. Let's have a conversation. And then suddenly people are like, oh, actually, I see what's happening here. And then they're more open and collaborative. So even if you only did that piece with a wider audience, you can pick those pieces, and that starts to create more collaborative work in your organization. Then you're starting a chain of events that brings that. You talked about investing in people, but people are then willing to invest in the organization for themselves as well.
It's a 9-point program delivered over 12 weeks. We have excellent examples of how we're progressing along. I think we've just done point 6, so we're leading on to point 7.
Yeah.
So what's next in the program when we approach? What is point 7?
3 points is being relevant and interesting, because nobody's listening to you, by the way, unless you're relevant to them and you're interesting to them and hopefully inspiring to them. So let's go back to our feedback thing, is like relevant and interesting, because often, unfortunately, and we are clever, we are technically very good, and we are able to give people lots of information, and we're used to dealing with lots of information, then we forget to trying to convey information to communicate with, and how they need to receive this information so that they can hear it and be inspired by it, because nobody's going to do what you want them to do. Nobody's going to buy in. Nobody's going to invest in you if it's not relevant and interesting and they can't understand it. Okay. And so I know we talked a little bit before about Lycra Pants, and I can't remember where we've actually about it, but I perhaps want to bring this up here.
Caught me by surprise there, Julie. This was, we were talking about a problem with clever people, and I think it was that they are a little bit in their mind ahead of where everyone else is, and they don't bother closing that gap. So they just come across as detached. But the Lycra Pants, I think, was because you were using the analogy that they were like the super fit runner.
That's right.
With their Lycra Pants on, boasting, and a little bit kind of leaving the rest of us who maybe we've got our sports gear still in the cupboard.
Exactly.
We're not quite with you. Is that right, Julie?
Yeah, what I'm saying is if you're a clever person, like tech, okay, and you want to, let's just say that you are not in a tech, I'm just going to give an example, but you're not in a technically advanced organization. You work in a dog food factory, for example, and you're saying, well, if you do all this new tech stuff, then it's going to make life a lot easier. Bob, the my director, is not listening, because Bob has no idea what you're talking about, and you are not meeting him where he is. Okay, and so that's where the Lycra Pants come in. As you say, imagine somebody, they turn up in the old spandex or whatever it is, and they've got flash trainers, and they go to you, we're going to take you running, and you're like, oh my God, I haven't run for 55 years. And so I'm doing, and I'm going to have to find my tracksuit bottoms and my really good trainers wear. And he says, I'm you on the running track at 6 o'clock in the morning, be ready. And you get there, and he turns up in these flash things, and you're just like, I now feel stupid. I now feel like I'm not good enough. They know more than me. I'm not comfortable. And 1, I don't have rapport with this person. But 2, you're going to make me feel even sillier. And then they say, right, what we're going to do is see how fast you can go. Let's go. And then they want to take you straight away on running around on that 200 meters or whatever it's going to be. And you're not going to play the game. You're not going to go with them, because you're going too fast for them, and you're making them feel bad. And that's why I say, are you wearing the Lycra Pants? Because really important here is that you have to be able to articulate things in a way that people can digest, people can want to be around you, and that you don't just show up being flash about what you know and actually creating barriers rather than creating. Because people, if they need to change, going back to what your role is as agent of change, If people need to change, they need to feel safe. They need to see that they can see the future, and they need to feel that they want to go with you again. And you're just making them feel like they don't want to come with you, and they don't feel safe, and they actually feel like you're going to embarrass them. So here, it's super, super important that you are relevant, interesting, and digestible to people. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a huge amount of sense. And I think there's a couple of things I would add to it. So if you understand that gap, that's giving you a lot of situational awareness for the company. I mean, I'm talking about now the odds of being able to actually digitally transform a business. Let's just say this dog food factory could take advantage of manufacturing flow techniques and all sorts of automated systems, but it's manual at the moment. So
Exactly.
in their industry, there's a huge potential to improve, but nobody in the business at the moment really understands that. So if you don't know that's the gap you've got to bridge, you'll never ever get the investment that you need for the technology, because people will just say, well, why do we need it? Now, there needs to be a little bit of hope, because hopefully you've been hired because they want to make that leap.
Yes.
And actually you joined because you were told we need to make this leap. So there is a bit of, but then the person who interviewed you might not have been as well as connected, or might have been a bit more optimistic about what the appetite for change was.
Well, and we know that sometimes when somebody walks into the business, coming back to your first 100 days, walk into the business with your Lycra pants on, let's say, then they might not be the people that you're trying to persuade, may not be the people that asked you to come. And also, sometimes we know we need something, but that doesn't mean we want it. If we're scared,
you can be seen as a threat.
Totally.
And that threat response will close all sorts of doors.
Exactly. So what we're doing in this area, these last 3 points, is how do we get the buy-in, and how do we articulate the value that we're bringing in a way that people can digest? So that first one is, how are we, and it links in with some of that side of things that we talked about before, but it's about, how do I articulate my vision? How do I bring people with me in what I believe in, what I stand for, what I think is right? Because we can think we're right and everybody else is wrong, but if they don't get it, they ain't going where we want to go. So we need to be able to articulate why we think something's right, how it will help them, and what they need to do. But if we dive straight in, then we're not going to have them coming with us, because we're in our Lycra pants and we're making them feel like that what they've done for the past probably 45 years is not good enough. Right. The biggest things I think is problem for people is they get down in the weeds and they talk too much in the weeds about the stuff that they know. So people get overwhelmed, they don't understand what we're talking about, and you lose them. So you're not interesting. You might be relevant, but you're not interesting to them or inspiring. So they switch off. So we need to look at, how do we up the level that we're looking at? How do we move from being down in those weeds to coming out, speaking at the level that we need to speak out?
And I would say, Julie, in the technical space, it's one of the things that I work really hard to solve, is just the altitude that I have to move from. Because with technology and engineering, you can have some things that are very detailed that can really very significant to the success or failure of your strategy. And then having to sort of translate that at various different levels, it can be really exhausting. And if you're exhausted, you can slip into a mode of talking a little bit more engineering to the business audience, or more business to the engineering audience. And it's funny, for both crowds, if you get too technical for a business audience, they'll just switch off and they'll probably think, oh, he's just trying to bamboozle us. And if you do the too business language, the engineers will just say, well, he doesn't really understand the engineering.
Exactly.
So it's an interesting point that you raise in your method, but I think it particularly applies to the CIO role, because of the amount of altitude we have to, what is it, above 10,000 feet, you need oxygen. And obviously too low an altitude, you're going to hit a tree, depending on how fast you're moving.
And you've got to find the level. You've got to find the right level for the right audience. And that goes back to some of the other parts of the jigsaw, is who's my audience? Where are they? Have I got a relationship with them? And all of those things. So you start to build the picture, this is the puzzle together. And the last one we talk about is, how do you actually get people to buy in to your ideas? Like, got that, you're articulating the value, but how do you get them to say yes? How do you get them to agree with what you want them to do? And I love this piece, because it's such a simple way of approaching things, to what we do. And I'm not going to tell you because that would be like giving it all away, wouldn't it, really? So I'm not going to tell you what we do. But if
Good.
you don't get people to agree with you at the high enough level, the real vision level, the purpose level, then again, they're going to think, oh, it's just a thing. It's just another add-on to the thing. They're not going to have bought into the reason why they need to do this. And so we also look at how do I translate that into getting people to say yes to me at that real emotive level. So that's much.
Brilliant. In true CTIO 101 fashion, are you able to sort of reflect on the 9 points, the 12 weeks, all the topics that we've covered in the session? Is there anything that kind of leaps out at you that you'd want to have at the top of the mind of the listener?
Just take it back. Think of this like a tree. So you've got your 9, but really what you need is those 3 above, which is, am I relevant and interesting? Am I positively impactful? Am I connected with my audience? 3 things, because that leads into that can't do, won't do, don't. Because you need to make sure that they can do, they want to, and they will do. At whatever level you're talking at, whether that's investment, whether that's the team doing what you want them to do, or your peers, or your husband or wife, or whatever it might be, it's the same thing. And so I would say it's to boil it down to those 3 things.
Okay, so Julie, what's my next steps? I'm really interested in the program. I can see a really strong opportunity for my team, or if I want to speak to a colleague or anything. So how do we, just to be clear to everyone who's listening, YouTube, you'll see that there's a paid promotion on the video. That's because of the channel sponsors, Fairmont Recruitment, which we're very grateful to. Julie's on here not to sell and not being sponsored, but right. I really do think, because we've gone through, you've given so much, shared so much in terms of the method and the approach. It's only fair that we should give people the opportunity to reach out to you if they want to.
Yeah, that's fine. If this is something that you think, do you know what, actually that would be useful for me, or it would be useful for somebody in my team or the whole team, then give me a shout. If you're interested in the program, email me at julie@thinkbedoleadership.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, which is the best place to find me. Hutchison with no N, by the way.
And Julie, what I'll do is I'll make sure that's all in the description on the video.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, massive thank you, Julie. Thank you for investing your time and the passion that you've put into this. Enjoyed
it, actually. It's in me because I put my heart and soul into this. We're still recording. This damn course is taken me, I've learned a lot doing this.
My name is Malcolm, and at the moment my intelligence is measured below that of a mouse. But in 100 years from now I may become self-aware, which is probably the point at which I will need a coach. CTIO 101. Business technology simplified and shared. Subscribe now. Sponsored by Fairmont Recruitment. Hiring technology professionals across the UK and Europe.